Okay, so let's start. I'm going to introduce Dr. Robert Bart first. He's the Chief Medical Information Officer from LA Department of Health Services. He has extensive clinical and IT background. He also has recognized leadership skills that allow him to bring seemingly desperate stakeholders, or desperate, and ideas together to help healthcare organizations evolve, compete, and be successful with complex healthcare information systems. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Bart. All right. That was just 1/8 of his bio, so just skimming the top here. Same thing with Dr. Steve Garske, CIO, Children's Hospital LA. He is a results-driven healthcare technology leader with over 10 years of CIO experience and over 20 years of technical experience. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome introducing Dr. Steve Garske. Okay. Next, we have Dr. Stephen Chen. He is an associate professor and associate dean for clinical affairs at the USC School of Pharmacy and the William A. Harris and Josephine A. Harris Endowed Chair in Community Pharmacy. He received his PharmD from USC and completed a USC affiliated residency in 1990. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chen. All right. And we also have Jeremiah Hargrave. I'm bad at names. Sorry, Dr. Jeremiah. He's the Director of Quality and Patient Safety at Torrance Memorial. He is currently the Director of Quality and Patient Safety and has over 18 years experience in quality in healthcare and automotive industries. He began his career in Toyota Motor Sales, where he gained extensive knowledge of lean and quality management. Folks, Jeremiah. So to start this out, the first panel will be talking about leveraging the strengths of quality-driven healthcare. Now, again, I have some prepared questions here, but I'm more interested in the questions that you guys have for the panelists, all right? So to start off, I'd just like to ask the panel, how has your work been impacted by quality-driven healthcare? And please check if the mics are working. All right.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Rob Bart from LA County. I think the most recent waiver, which started in 2015 or 2016, is the Public Hospital Redesign and Incentive in Medi-Cal, also known as the Prime Waiver. And so one of the things that's really moved us in our IT systems for the clinicians is actually constructing tools such that the quality metrics that are required by us to report to the state on the care that we're giving can be easily obtained through the process of delivering clinical care by the clinicians. In doing that, we're leveraging a solution called Healthy Intent, which is a population-based solution, and we're using that to create custom registries which align with the Prime Waiver such that we can capture that information and report it to the state. The thing that I like about this is it not only moves us to delivering a higher quality care by our primary care providers, but year on year we have to have a 15 to 20% improvement on each metric to keep hitting the mark with the state. And so that really is helping us drive sort of the quality and improvement in the process of care delivery.
Thank you.
From a Children's Hospital perspective, I would say that there's several components to the quality that we provide, and it's really related to the IT piece. The first, I think, is having the right tools in place. If you have a lot of tools, if you have too many, if they're not integrated, if they're not coordinated, then you really struggle to be able to get to the point where you're able to pull analytics, where you're able to pull at just about anything. And then the end result to the physicians, clinicians, could be compromised just because of the lack of integration. So that was, I would say, is probably the biggest challenge that we have, is we have so many tools out there that trying to consolidate those into one area is critically important for us.
this, but really quickly. Oops. Sorry. Okay, I'm back, sorry. How many physicians are in the room? Raise your hand if you're a physician. I mean, you got nurses, pharmacists, others. And how about non-clinicians? We're the non-clinicians. Okay, good. All right, it's everybody else. So usually I speak at a medical conference. The audience doesn't look this good, so you guys are I get it, non-clinicians. So when you think about patient quality and safety, be really honest. How many of you think about engaging a pharmacist? How many of you think about it? A few, okay. So this is common. Even in a healthcare audience, a blended mix of people, that's the same response I get. I think it's pretty simple. If you look at quality metrics, whether you're talking about your CMS 1115 or ACOs or whatever measure set you look at least half of the measures typically have measures that depend on optimal use of medications. So having pharmacists in the mix, both on the inpatient and outpatient side, can make a big difference in the ability of a healthcare organization to reach the measures, whether you're talking about STAR measures or anything else, that they're trying to attain that are tied to dollars, tied to reimbursement. So the alignment between quality, safety, and payment really opens up the door for pharmacists to become part of that answer. If you look at the statistics, 90% of chronic illnesses require medications to reach optimal results, right? You can't do everything by diet and exercise and everything else. And yet medication-related harm is a big issue in this country. For every dollar we spend on medications in this country, we spend another dollar fixing the problems those medications create through suboptimal use, through side effects, more doctor visits, more evaluations. It's really an epidemic, and it's something that we're focused on in our profession, basically spreading the work that pharmacists can do that most people don't think about when they think about retail pharmacy. I'll just introduce you.
Jeremiah, just a second. I'd like to thank Dr. Chen for being here. One of the issues that I've noticed in our organization here at HIMSS, as you can see, there aren't a lot of pharmacists in the audience. And Dr. Chen is a pharmacist, and I really want to bring in more of the other stakeholders that are not represented here. And if you guys have pharmacists that in our next event you think would be good to show up for our events, please invite them. Because I really think that solving quality is solving it through the ecosystem. And we can't do it in silo. You know, quality is not the work of the quality department, it's everyone's job. Now, I want to go back with, I think it was you, Steve, who mentioned the technology, right? So I've seen this over and over again where you get hospitals that have all these different tools that might do a little variation, something a little different, but you get inundated with all the tools. So if you're in the situation where you're looking at another tool to add on to your existing tool set, you walk over here, probably be better. There you go. What would your advice be to folks in the audience who might be looking at, oh, another BI, another dashboard, another widget?
Consolidate.
Consolidate.
So
okay.
as much as you possibly can, I would stay away from multiple EHRs, multiple different types of systems. I've had experience with 2 other systems. One of them had 8 EHRs and another had 6. And both of those experiences led me to leave, just because it is so difficult to be able to integrate those. First of all, our wonderful EHR vendors and suppliers have no incentive to be able to integrate. They want you to go to their wonderful EHRs. And although that's noble for them and profitable, it definitely is not the right thing for the hospital. So as much as you possibly can, I would suggest the consolidation of all those apps.
Okay. Thank you. And Jeremiah, before we move on to other topics, I want you to...
So I think quality-driven healthcare has really made us as a society change the way we fundamentally run our business. So coming from the automobile industry, I would never dream of, you know, if I'm a dealer, someone brings me their car, says change my oil. I say, okay, I changed your oil, here's the bill. In the process, I dented your hood. And so for $200, I'll fix that for you too. Right? As consumers, we're not going to pay for that. In a hospital, you come in, we treat you for your primary diagnosis. While you're there, maybe we give you an infection. We say, okay, so on top of that, we're going to charge you for this infection. And 10 years ago, we got paid for that. That doesn't happen anymore. So we have to now, I think in healthcare, we've always wanted to do the best thing for our patients. However, we're now being held accountable to the quality a little more, and our pocketbooks are being hit. So it makes us really look at our systems, really look at what we focus our process improvements on, and how do we utilize our systems to get the correct data, pull that data that we need that will help focus us onto the problems that we should be working on, that will lead us to the best outcomes for our patients, and in turn, we'll get the money that we deserve and we really should be earning, and not get paid for things that we shouldn't really be getting paid for. So I think for me, that's what my aha was as I came into healthcare. It's like, really, we give people infections and we get paid for that? Seems kind of odd to me.
All right, cool.
So.
You had anything you wanted to?
I was just going to add to Steve's comment. I think that he's spot on sort of the integration and cohesiveness of the tool set that you have to provide to clinicians. I think that interoperability is a myth when you're talking about at the end user clinician being able to do everything in one screen. I don't want to end up having to put 2 screens in front of all of my clinicians, much less 3 or 4. And for all of the software solution vendors who are here today, I think that the thing that you have to look at is how do you integrate into the core main EHR that a given organization is using, because that becomes the one receptacle that those clinicians interact with and want to use to consume information. And if it has to come through another portal, it's going to fall to disuse and or the safety of the patient whose information is in that portal will be compromised.
I would also add that the challenge, obviously, with going to one EHR is the cost. So those 2 different systems that I worked for that had the 6 and the 8 different EHRs, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so how do you find those dollars? And then you also have to structure your organization to be ready for a transition that is just extremely painful. And it's typically a CIO killer, just because of the stress and the amount of issues and challenges that you face in any type of transition. But the cost in general is very expensive.
Steve, I appreciated your comment about the number of EHR solutions and, just the mere fact that interoperability is certainly a dream. I wonder what the panel's position is on maybe the level of adoption versus implementation. In as much as years ago there was a book, and it'll probably date me, but I think it was called From Good to Great. And I think the crux of that book was, you don't need a new widget all the time. We just need to ensure that our people are using the widget they have effectively. So what are your thoughts on perhaps the level of adoption that has been achieved by these many different tools? And would you believe if people began to actually use them successfully and perform at a high level, that might alleviate some of those challenges you guys face?
You're absolutely right. I would say, though, that if you have 6 or 8 widgets, that it's difficult for those physicians, clinicians to be able to use all 6 or 8 of them. So if you consolidate first, which is really the key, Dr. Bart is absolutely right, and then from there, there's a myriad of things that you have to have ready, and that's what I was referring to. You have to make sure that your workflows are correct. You have to make sure you have support. You have to make sure you have the right vendor, that you still have to integrate with many other systems, but it's that core that I would say is reduce those widgets, make sure that you have that core solidified, and then from there you can get to great. It's a lot easier once you have that foundation built.
Did you talk, when you said Good to Great, is that the book by Jim Collins?
Yes, that was the
Okay, so one fascinating thing, I'm going to segue here a little bit. In that book, when they talked about the different great companies or companies that went from good to great, is that they really didn't have a Monday morning slogan du jour that they did. It was something that organically the organization kind of moved from good to great without having this conscious, hey, we're going to be great by Thursday, 3/17. It was something that they did. Now, do you guys see quality as something that people move from bad, good to great in that fashion too, or is it something that has to be more prescriptive?
I think a little of both.
Okay.
I think so. At our organization, we did a lot of great things. We always worked hard on process improvements and quality. More recently, we're now focusing our efforts to say, here's kind of our true north. Here's where we need to go.
Right.
So we have that compass. We know where we want to get. And in the beginning, it's like, if we don't hit these measures, we're going to lose reimbursement, and bad things are going to happen.
Right.
But kind of, it just started to happen where, okay, here's the focus, and then you'd see people kind of grasping it, and now you have people coming up with their own ideas and saying, we really need to start moving the needle, and this is important to me, and now I see why it's important to the organization. And so it's less of the quality department or our executives or leadership coming out saying, here are the things we need to focus on. We always have that. But more of our frontline people that know what's going on saying, but this is what I'm seeing.
Right.
And I really want to improve this, and how can we help you now push the needle and move in your own way?
Right.
I think that I'd agree with that. And one of the challenges is historically the solutions, the technologies that we've provided for clinicians to use, they did one thing. They tried to do clinical care, and then quality was an afterthought related to that. And we'll extract the data later if your EHR can actually allow you to do that, which is a challenge that all the EHRs face. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do is realign that effective and efficient care is quality care, and realign that as the single mission, so that the process of delivering the care process is a quality care process, such that in that delivery, you don't have to worry about extracting the data later, because the process of delivering the care documents the quality that was delivered. And that's a different mindset for clinicians to get into.
Correct.
But if you get your clinicians there, then I think you can go from good to great, and you do have that mindset and ability to make that transition.
David? No. He was checking his emails. I want to pull him back in. I'm kidding.
There it goes. I couldn't help but think, I was in a program called the Council for Excellence in Government in like 2002 and 3, and that book was our theme for the course of this year. And when I showed you the organizational chart with no names on it at CMS and told you that there's no mission statement for CMS on the website, you can see why our government doesn't perform the way you would like it to, and why it doesn't run like a business. Because in a business, every 4 years, they don't pull everybody out and put in a whole bunch of people, sometimes with whom they want you to go in a completely different direction. So the new CMS director said, well, Medicaid's going in the wrong direction. The core purpose of Medicaid isn't to give all these people health insurance. It's only for the most vulnerable people or whatever, different direction. The thing I remember from that book, and it's still powerful to me, was the enduring mission, and then the Toyota example of the individual that could stop the line, or like on a plane, if one of the crew doesn't like it, you're not taking off,
Right.
And empowering a technical person to stop a procedure or something because they see something wrong. That's such a deep, enduring value. It doesn't really exist in the government. I don't think that the structure of a bureaucracy really allows for it. I think it's really unfortunate. I think our whole health system suffers from this pillar to post, which is why they took Social Security out and made it a 10-year job, why the Federal Security or Federal Reserve is. You have to have some stability in places. And right now in healthcare from the top, it's not stable. So you're not getting stability, from our government and what they want to do. They don't have an enduring mission. And our leaders, most of them can't even talk coherently about healthcare. They don't know that much about it. I mean, President Obama was a great guy, but he really didn't know that much about healthcare policy. They call this thing Obamacare, but he didn't come up with it. So we just, it's pretty hard to be the leader on defense and healthcare and justice and all this stuff. It's a problem, and you need to find people, and you need to keep them around for a little while, And I don't think we've ever recovered from Dr. Berwick not getting approved when, he's like, as far as I'm concerned, the hero of health quality, to have that guy running CMS. We have these horrible surveys. I'll stop. In the government, you get this survey every year, the Employee Viewpoint Survey, and they do it across the whole government. And every year, NASA and some other little agency ranks great, and CMS and IRS rank terrible. And so you get the results, and right away, we have this program to figure out, well, this year, we're going to focus on the things that were bad and bring them up. And next year, we're going to focus on the things that are good and make them better. But whatever we did, as soon as we started doing it, the next survey was already there. being administered again. The only time it ever changed was when Dr. Berwick came, shot right up. Because people had a leader that was up there saying things that he believed in a coherent way that they could believe, the core of which was this notion of we have to figure out how to coordinate the care for the people that we're financing care for and encourage the system to do that. And these people are doing that. Your example about the pharmacist is a great example.
You know, I would say that you've hit two very important points. The first is that leadership. It's absolutely critical. And I would say that there is a lot of fatigue on the IT side due to a lot of us in this room having gone through the first generation of EHRs and the growing and the helping and the building of those tools in unison with the vendors. It takes a lot out of a team. So what I've seen is that a lot of the team members start jumping just because of the fact, and I'm not talking necessarily at the government level, but down at the hospital level, is that they are beaten up so bad by whoever in the organization that they need a fresh start. And so it is challenging to make sure that we can get to that next level of quality after having gone through these last 10 years of very difficult times with our EHRs.
Any questions? All right. One second, buddy. We'll get to the microphone. Okay.
Hi, I'm looking at it as far as the technologies. I'm looking at the EHR and looking at what is coming down the pipeline is the big data and digital transformations. When I look at the EHR, existing EHR, they built these EHR based on the old softwares, and they are becoming dinosaurs. In 2 years, any organization, they should force their vendors and looking for the big data and digital transformation, because your DHR, you spend over than $1 billion, it becomes zero assets for you. And that's what they have to look at it. I mean, the smart medications are coming in real time. I mean, with my background was in NASA, we look at the real time. Unfortunately, in healthcare, we look at the historical data. We have to move away from historical data. They do have value, but they don't have real-time value. We have to look at the real-time value and what is coming in and open source systems in from our vendors.
Very good point. Is the mic acting up?
All right, there we go. So if you look at a couple of case studies, let me use Cerner, for example. Oracle's not necessarily an old technology. Well, I guess it could be considered that, but that's what they're based on. But their EDW is based on Hadoop and HP Vertica. So if you dig down into the actual architecture, at least Cerner, from what I can see, is doing that. And so I think open source is definitely the direction that we will all want to go. And I think that there are strides going in that direction, and I can speak to the Cerner side, not so much the Epic.
I'd add that what you're ultimately talking about is commoditization of the EHR market. And so will it turn into a simple commodity that it doesn't matter which brand it is, you're going to have interoperability, it's going to have the same look and feel and functionality. A lot of sort of predictors in healthcare IT, people who do this sort of thing, have been predicting commoditization of EHR since 2010. And in 2017, we're no closer than we were in 2010. And those same people are now predicting that by 2020 this will happen. And it's not going to happen at that point. The commoditization won't happen, I think, until sort of either the government regulatory construct becomes so overbearing that you don't have any latitude in your EHR, so they all get forced to look the same, and or the opportunity to make money as capital from an EHR goes away. Once those two conditions are satisfied, then you'll have commoditization, and then you might have a much more interoperable level playing field between the EHR market space.
There's a. All right.
It's great to have a panel of a diverse group here, and I think it's so important for us to be able to brainstorm with you. one of the things I keep hearing about is the ability to take in information from different disparate systems and integrate it into an enterprise data warehouse. And then if I'm thinking about something, could I not visualize different elements and put it up there and invite others around the table to help me brainstorm? What is it we're seeing? What do you see, social work? What do you see, a criminal justice system? So that we have the opportunity to brainstorm together. But I think part of, and I think I've seen reports and papers that some of these medical centers and other systems are doing this now, which is really exciting. But one of the challenges I hear from IT colleagues is that we don't have the sophistication and the knowledge in leadership in healthcare, health systems, to understand what can and can't be done. If you were developing leadership for tomorrow, what would you want to make sure, not that they're going to be doing programming, but what do you see needs to be in place to help ensure we have that they have a good palette of understanding and can appreciate what the technology can and what some of the limitations are?
Good question. Very good question.
So what comes to my mind right away is that when I'm hiring people for those positions, and it is a blossoming field, especially on the data scientist side, data analyst side, is they need to be technical. And I've worked with so many that are so great that are not necessarily technical, but have struggled, especially when you're talking about new technology. So when we're looking at the Hadoop-based platforms, not necessarily new, but how many people out there know how to utilize Hadoop or program or set up databases in different types of open source databases? It's hard to find. So what I find is that there's a lot of ideas out there. There's millions of ideas. It's the implementation of those ideas that are really falling behind.
There's a unique set of clinicians that are out there that can serve as the fundamental translators between technology and what's needed clinically and the outcomes. And if you're a director of quality, you don't necessarily need to be that person or head of pharma, but you have to have that person as one of your trusted colleagues that's sort of your right-hand person that you can go to, who can make that translation between Steve's staff and what they're doing and what the director of quality needs to come out of that solution. Someone needs to be able to bridge the conversation between the actual quality metrics and what the Hadoop database is doing. I know how to do some programming. I don't know how to do a lot of it, and I don't actually enjoy programming. But what I do know how to do is I know how to interact with, and Steve and I have worked together, so I know how to interact with Steve and his colleagues in the technology realm and translate that to the straight clinician who's never thought about technology and helping them get what they need out of the solution or system for whatever thing that they're doing. And I think that's a unique role that we don't do a good job within healthcare of fostering. Traditional clinical informatics doesn't necessarily get to it because clinical informaticians are being trained more about the database, the data model, those types of things. And what I prefer to do is use a term called functional informatics. This is the translation of what clinical or the business needs with the technology, and to sit sort of on that fence and be able to provide that dialogue and make sure that conversation occurs. And I don't think we spend enough time fostering that within our clinicians and clinical environment.
Bob, I'll add really quickly that whenever we've partnered with organizations where there's a clinician leader in IT, it makes all the difference for the reasons you just stated. I think you're absolutely correct. Another quick comment that had sort of relates to what somebody else asked is this whole issue of real-time data. And one of the things that, as I mentioned before, patients don't take their meds, quality doesn't improve. And this is one reason to think about connecting with pharmacy. Pharmacy becomes sort of your eyes and ears out in the community and can feed that back to you. But even that sometimes can have a lag because we're also looking at refills, and now you're 30 days out from the last time you saw that patient, right? So we're working with many companies, one of them within USC, that's looking at spreading technologies that can real-time track patients' use of meds and then feed that back within the same day or even at the same hour or same quarter of the day and let you know what's going on with those patients. So some interesting things are popping up at the university.
That's a great point. A question for Dr. Bart, based on what you just stated. So a translator, absolutely, and I love working with you. Do you necessarily have to be technical in order to be a translator?
It's an understanding of the vocabulary, the use of the vocabulary and the role of it. You actually have to know both, right? I'm actually admire you because you came from a completely different industry and had to learn the healthcare vocabulary, which I think is an incredible challenge, right? But most clinicians know the healthcare vocabulary. They don't understand the IT technology vocabulary, and then they don't understand how those pieces fit together. And I think the good projects, good programs, and successful ones have a number of those individuals who bridge that gap between just the two worlds of vocabulary and can do that translation. And I think that's the important thing. So I do have to have some understanding of Hadoop, but do I actually need to know how to program on it? I don't need to, but I do need to understand its role, its use. I need to understand the use cases that might apply to it as a data construct and data model. But the actual, do I want to sit down and do the data scientist work of putting data into it? Not really.
Yeah, and that's spot on. So, and the physician side of it, we know the IT side of it, and half of my job is translating to the executives as well, just to try to justify the multi-millions of dollars that we have to spend. Exactly. But I understand how that is, and having that physician interface is absolutely critical.
I want to pull Jeremy in. You made a great point. You transitioned from Toyota, and anyone who's ever been to any Lean or any Six Sigma, everyone has heard of how Toyota has been able to do a lot of good things in terms of quality by standardizing a lot of processes. Now, for you, what are the things that you've seen in Toyota that, going to work day to day in healthcare, you're like, oh man, if only we were able to take this best practice in Toyota into healthcare, it would have solved X problem. What are the things that you've seen?
Let me add one thing before you answer.
Sure.
And then for me, I'd be interested in where do you think the Toyota methodology falls short in its application to healthcare?
Conversely, yeah.
The converse of that.
So
no pressure.
Yeah. So I think David talked about a little bit the andon cord, pulling the cord. So that's a concept that at Toyota is pretty well understood. The frontline staff, so if you think of an assembly line in a manufacturing plant, it's something like $3,000 a minute to run. If I notice some damage, I'm empowered as that frontline guy that's putting 3 bolts on a door to stop that line, at least slow it down, right? So you've given me a lot of responsibility to stop the line. In healthcare, Ian, we talked about a little bit, hand washing.
Right.
Right. It's as simple as washing our hands. We know that will reduce the spread of infections. Yet we're very afraid to go up to a physician and say, hey, doc, you didn't wash your hands. I noticed you didn't wash when you came out of that room. And it's even worse if that room, that patient has C. diff, or that patient, is in isolation precautions. But we're terrified, it seems, to say, please wash your hands. So I think that's one major concept. In ORs, as much as we have improved in the years, there's still wrong side surgeries, right? A few a day or a few a week at least. So it's astonishing to me that we won't stop those procedures still. So for me, and it's a very simple, maybe I make it too simplistic, but I know it's decades and decades of hierarchy and trying to overcome that. So I think that's standardized work is another one. So I get this all the time. These are not cars. We're not making widgets. These are people, right? I understand that. So as people come in, I understand every patient's a little different. The care that we have to provide is going to be a little different. But all of those processes that surround the care that we're providing generally can be standardized. Our supply chains can be standardized. And again, I'm not clinical, so I understand a little. My best example is like a Foley catheter, right? There's a little balloon, and if you don't deflate it and you try to take it out,
It's a painful
it's
example.
going to be a little painful,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So there's standard work with catheters, and if you don't follow the standard work, you're going to harm somebody. So, but we still struggle with standard work. We struggle getting people to follow those and follow that. So I think that's two pretty, I think, basic, in my mind, basic concepts. And I understand in manufacturing plants, it's a little bit easier. If I need to weld in certain parts, I make a jig, and you can only weld, in those certain areas. So I think that's some of it. And I think the
Jeremiah, before you answer the second part, I'll just pull the audience here. Raise your hand if you figured out the issue with compliance with hand washing. 100% hand washing. Raise your hand. Isn't that astonishing that something as basic as hand washing still comes up on our issues list? And it's not like people don't understand the importance of it. And it's not like we haven't put all of the different areas to make it more convenient. We've timed these things, time and motion studies. We've done all that. Everyone knows. So again, we were talking about this earlier. That for me is amazing that we're talking about virtual reality. We're talking about all these different technologies, yet some of the basic stuff we're still grappling with. And I'd like to open to, after you finish the second piece, I want to take away from Dr. Bart's question, why we still struggle with a lot of the basic stuff. But please.
So a little tougher, because I think Lean and TPS is an awesome system and fits anywhere. But I think we are dealing with people, right? So we are dealing with patients, and so I didn't come from the manufacturing side of Toyota. I came from the supply chain side. So I've seen it. I know in a manufacturing plant it works very easy. It's very standardized. Supply chain's a little bit tougher because there's more variation. In healthcare, even more variation. So I think if I say it falls short anywhere, is that there are so many more challenges, so many more metrics, so many more processes in healthcare.
Right.
So putting together a car is difficult. There's 25, 30,000 components. So I'm not saying it's not complex, but they don't really change. So healthcare, we are constantly changing. So I think Lean is really really methodical, and it's not always the fastest change approach. So when we do it right, we have great outcomes, and we can sustain it. Sometimes initiatives are changing so quickly, our patient population is changing so quickly that we can't adapt to that quick enough.
I would say also that leadership breeds innovation. And one of the things that we were able to do at one of our systems for that hand washing area is to utilize the technology that we had. So we had a virtual desktop infrastructure, and we had the idea of placing the actual badge readers next to the hand washing dispensers.
Right.
And so anytime anyone would actually dispense, if they wanted to, they could prove that they were actually washing their hands. And then when they tapped into the computer into that room, you can combine those two data points and determine that they were in the room and they washed their hands. And so that's a creative way of being able to use the technology, hopefully, that would at least get we were over 90%, and it increased every month after.
What I'll comment on is we've worked with so many health systems, and what we see is that most can do a good job of capturing data, but don't feed it back to everybody, all the stakeholders in the health system, in a way where they can look at it, study it, and improve. I think most of you do PDSAs in your workplace. You can't do that unless you get data moving pretty quickly through. So that's one of the things that we've seen as being a sort of barrier to quality improvement in a pretty efficient manner. The other thought is we ran a national collaborative with the Health Resources and Services Administration that was multidisciplinary, focusing on maximizing use of medications. We had everybody in the room, nurses, physicians, pharmacists, everybody. And the theme that we rallied everybody around was pretty simple. It's patient safety is everybody's business.
Right.
And we had some powerful testimonials of people that experienced severe harm from the health system, commercially insured, middle-class America, things that just shouldn't have happened. And yet when you look at who could have stopped that, it could have been everybody from the physician to the pharmacist to the technician to the medical. There's so many people that saw something wrong, But because of the fragmentation we have in our healthcare system, the hierarchy you spoke about, they didn't feel like that was my piece to intervene on. And I think that culture is what we're trying to change.
I want to add one other comment or thought. I know that something that kind of blew me away as well when I came is, again, if I'm in a manufacturing plant at Toyota, I'm empowered to pull the cord. I stop the line. So as we were going to teams and saying, you know, we want your input, we want you to solve your problems, it was a challenge to get people to give us answers. So a lot of people were really used to just going to leadership and saying, what do you want me to do? And they got their answer and they went off. So it was as much of a challenge, it was just as much of a challenge to get our leaders to, maybe not as much, to say, you know, we're going to empower our teams, we want you to turn into coaches and not always provide answers. Once we did that, the shocking part to me was that it was challenging to get them to want to be empowered. So I don't know if you guys struggle with that, or if you go up to your frontline team members, they're more than happy to share answers with you, or are they just looking for answers? I mean,
Well, this is a good time to ask the audience at this point. Do you guys have any stories, best practices that you've done in your organization that has led to more sharing from the front line of things that need to be fixed? Working as a frontline bedside nurse, one of the things that was hard for me, at least when I was doing bedside, was it might come back and be punitive on my side. Now I know that there's been a lot of effort taking out that punitive environment from the organization. So for you guys, if you have any best practice, please share with the team. So how you get frontline staff to be more open for opportunities for change. Is there one over there? Good.
So one of the things that we've done pretty successfully across a lot of different customer profiles, ranging from the clinic level all the way to the enterprise, both in the ambulatory and acute settings, has been establishing steering committees, having routine incremental touch points with a variety of different stakeholders on the clinical side, on the information technology side, leadership side, et cetera, to really understand the respective challenges and, more importantly, the impact. So when you look at, for example, a simple modification to IT infrastructure, it could have a dramatic effect on the workflow, the nuances of communication, the list goes on. So one of the things that we've been able to do is really bring a lot of people and personalities to the table that have a different interest in the discourse of the organization as it relates to technology, as it relates to clinical matters, as it relates to operations, and really harmonizing that approach and looking at, again, the respective impact when changes are made. More importantly, making those changes together so that we're aware of everything that's happening. So that's been really successful for us. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a best practice. It's hard to define a best practice in this space, but certainly is a good starting point to initiate that dialogue. The key, in my mind, is having that incremental touch point and sticking to it. A lot of times you start these types of dialogues or initiatives and they fall flat because you're not able to get the doctors to participate because they're too busy seeing patients. So you really need to enforce a policy around a steering committee so that it can function and deliver results.
I have a question. When I hear steering committee, I hear mostly management folks. Do you guys have frontline in that steering committee, or?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we kind of function as the glue, if you will, that holds it all together. So yeah, it's not comprised of any one department or one category of professional discourse or licensing or credentialing. Rather, it is spanned across the different stakeholders at the organization. And I'm talking about medical assistants, nurses, physicians, information technology personnel, leadership, operations people. Again, probably too many to list in just this response. But again, we try to do that without introducing too much complexity. And what that means is as those people participate in that ecosystem and that dialogue, they have certain takeaways and action items at each touch point so that they understand what their deliverables are. They have, of course, an entire group of people holding them accountable to that. And what I've discovered is, certainly in the clinical space, scoreboards are important. There's a lot of improvement that we've achieved as a consequence of really holding people's feet to the fire and putting them in a more competitive type of environment as it relates to some of these initiatives.
Just really quickly, in those sorts of committees that you're referring to, depending on the focus, we're starting to add patients as members.
Absolutely, yeah. Patients are part of that as well. And what we try to do is identify patients across different demographics, right? So not only taking the youngest patients that are familiar with the smartphone and a patient portal and understand their health record with maybe a little more depth, but also the elderly folks and everyone in between that may be disconnected from that process. Patients are effectively consumers, right? So the customer is always right, as we all know here, right? So knowing that and appreciating that in the context of healthcare is important as well.
Thanks so much. Paul? It's not your time yet, by the way, just so.
No, I just wanted to, because it's about the front line, and what I've seen that was very successful is leadership Gemba board rounding. And we would go each of the nursing floors, and the floors wouldn't know which floor we're actually coming to. And on that board, there were all of the various metrics, whether it's falls or response, stuff like that. And when we'd go there and be a rounding facility, in a hallway where the board is, and for each of those issues, it was sort of a lean approach where you would identify what the problem is. And it was a wonderful way of really engaging the front line in quality and making them proud to be part of that initiative. And because the leadership was there taking the time, it really worked wonderfully. And lots of great ideas came from it. And the front line was absolutely engaged, and I just want to throw that out. It worked well. It's a Japanese sort of approach.
Nice. I'm giving Paul a hard time because he's moderating the next session. Oh, yes, please. Takes a few seconds, yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh.
There you
okay.
go.
So I just wanted to tag on to the first gentleman's comment with respect to the steering committees, and I would have to agree, and dashboards and all of that is great. I do think it's very important, and having been involved when I was with organization for a health plan, implementing technology, and also as a consultant now, I think we're missing something that's very important here, and in order to get buy-in from your frontline staff, the first thing that they think when you're implementing technology is how many of us are they going to eliminate? So job security. And so we have the human element, and I believe that sometimes people think, well, technology and the human, it doesn't go together. I have to disagree. I think they go together very well. And the key and the way that we've overcome this in the past, whether it was when administrating at an MSO and working with an IPA very closely here where we had physicians and staff and we had to incorporate EHR and get frontline, was involving them in the beginning. And actually we did blind surveys with frontline staff, and we used that and then had them involved. And I agree, having patients on the committee is very important. But even more important is communication. And communication, not just by email, but communicating what we're doing and then walking your talk and reassuring them. And if there are going to be cuts, or sometimes you may be cutting from this department and you're placing in another, then communicating that well in advance to eliminate the fear so that they know that, and this is what the technology is going to do for you, not just for the company. You're valuable. We need you here now. We may need you there later, and having them really feel like they're a part of the end result. Because if you don't get the staff's buy-in, then you may not even be, they may be on a steering committee, but you may not be hearing exactly what's going on the front line because they're afraid to give information. And very often, it's like if you're a new director or a VP in an organization and you want your management to communicate and they're not telling you what's going on because they're hoarding the information so that you need them. Does that make sense? But you want this now. Sabotaging. So communication is key, but you want to get their buy-in, and they have to feel secure. When people are afraid, they're not going to communicate back.
Right. So just housekeeping, guys. We should be ending right around now. I'm going to extend it for 5 more minutes, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. I definitely want to get our panel their final word in, so to speak. they're going to be here throughout the day if you guys have any questions, but I want to have them do their final word, and then we'll throw out for a few more questions, and we'll wrap up the panel. David, how does that sound? Good. All right. So thank you so much, by the way. So you can start wherever.
So I appreciate your comment. Pharmacy is maybe a good example to fit in there, and I try to fit us in wherever we can, just because it does make sense. People are threatened when you say, hey, we're thinking about bringing a pharmacist in, and then what do you hear? You hear the other clinical staff say, well, are you going to replace us? Is that the idea? If we have an idea to improve med safety, they worry, oh, it's more work, or all these complaints that come up. We build this as, and it's pretty simple. We're trying to help you get what you need to get done anyway, more efficiently and better. That's sort of the bottom line. And once they adapt and partner with us in a way that focuses on patient safety and the medications, they realize that no, we're something that adds value. We're not someone that's trying to come in here and take away. And in the end of the day, as you're trying to meet these P for P measures, these metrics that really add to the bottom line of your organization, working with pharmacy, adding these new pieces in helps you get there.
All right.
So there are a couple of themes that I think came up today. The primary in my mind is the leadership piece. I think good leadership will communicate well. I think good leadership will allow us to move forward with the technologies that are there, and the ability and the confidence of the IT teams to be able to do this correctly, along with our wonderful physicians and clinicians. To be able to do that is a very difficult task, but is something that we absolutely have to do. That leadership also drives a lot of behavior. I can give you an example. One of the hospitals that I worked at, where we were talking about serious safety events, SSEs, and we did an analysis on why those SSEs were occurring in the OR. And what we discovered was that 60% of the nurses were too afraid to confront the physician to stop the surgery, so to pull that cord. And a lot of that was because they didn't have the confidence in the leadership to be able to back them up. And so that lack of communication, that ability to be able to move forward with those types of issues is a major issue. But as we continue to advance on the technology side, I think it's absolutely critical that we do this the right way to be able to help with those SSEs and any other type of examples that are out there.
Yeah, I'd add on what Steve said. I think a lot of what healthcare has tried to do to address some of this is the concept of a just culture. And that's been rolled out at probably almost every healthcare delivery organization I've touched in the last 10 years. And I think that the concepts around just culture are good, but I think the execution of just culture has failed. And for many of the reasons that have been outlined both by the audience and by the people up here on this panel, Los Angeles County Department of Health Services is a government healthcare delivery organization. So if there's anywhere where hierarchy reigns supreme, it's within a government healthcare delivery organization. And one of the colleagues I work with, closely with, Dr. Arun Patel, oversees our quality and safety group. And he tried and has been continuing to try for many years to roll out a just culture within the Department of Health Services. And in an organization that has such a strong traditional perspective on hierarchy, it's very, very challenging. And to know and hear that in other, I would say, more progressive organizations, even there, just culture has challenges. I think that we need to, I'm not saying we need to abandon it, because I think it has done many good things, but we need to understand how to make it work more effectively, because it clearly hasn't gotten to the point where the scrub nurse or the circulating nurse feels comfortable telling the surgeon that they're on the wrong side of the patient.
Jeremiah, before your last thoughts, what do you think was the evolution, so to speak, wherein the frontliner in Toyota, the widget guy, was able to pull the cord or at least tell the head of manufacturing, hey, there's a problem here? Because I'm pretty sure that's not how it started. That had to be some sort of evolution.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'll speculate, but I think
Sure.
I'm sure there was, at some point, Toyota was not very productive.
Right.
Went through and created more production. Watched a lot of companies from America, and I think there was somebody, probably maybe it was Taiichi Ohno or Sakichi Toyota, somebody that said, they know what they're doing. We can't manage, and I know Deming had a lot to do with manage processes, don't manage the people. People come to work to do a good job. So as we manage processes, we know that when the process is out of whack, that guy that's making that widget is the one that knows.
Right.
So I think it was an evolution probably somewhere in the 50s or 60s that said they're the guys that are working, they're making it. Something has happened. I'm back here in my office. I'm not going to see it. So I think that's probably that evolution.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think for me, so a lot of my job is really bringing people together. So I'm the quality department, and I'm over in the kind of in the south building of our campus, kind of off to the side. People say, hey, I need to come see you. How do you get there? I say, I'm just going to come to you. It's easier than you trying to figure out how to get here. So I'm the quality department. We're looking at measures. We know the specs, but I can't change anything. So I think the evolution of quality-driven healthcare is really how we have to have all players in the room. We have to learn how to leverage our technology to get the data we need, to hear what our clinicians are saying about the technology that we're putting in place, to get it to work for them better. And I think there's such a rapid change in technology that it's hard, it's difficult. So Steve mentioned for the technology side, there's a lot of fatigue. For the end users, there's a lot of fatigue. So it's really how do we utilize, we change processes, how do we manage that fatigue, and how do we get the right people in the room, the frontline staff? How do we communicate better, make sure that people aren't afraid that when we introduce technology or when we do a rapid improvement event that we're going to eliminate jobs. I can tell you from my organization, we have a no layoff policy with anything that has to do with lean. So if we eliminate positions out of a project, you will be reallocated. You won't be, our CEO has stated that publicly. And I will also say that I don't think we're anywhere close to putting a process in that we would say, well, we've driven out so much waste that we'll move people. So I think we really need to just learn how do we work together, how do we leverage our technology, and really get the right people in the room.
David, definitely want to get your take on here too.
I guess if I have a thought after hearing what I heard, that we really have made a lot of progress in the amount of time that I've been working around these things and meeting people and traveling around the country. And I think we're going to make a lot more progress if we can focus on the ideas of leadership and empowering people. And it's really organizations like this or CAPG or others that bring together a group of professionals to make the profession better, that makes the whole thing better. So in terms of leadership, I salute you and Jerry and the other people on the board and members here at HIMSS, because it's an organization that's really leading a transformation that's really very valuable and is kind of at a very important inflection point going into this next phase, if you will.
Thank you. Right. So we'll take one last question if you guys want before we break. One last question. Any brave soul? That will work.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm sitting here listening and thinking that either there is a shift or a trend that's happening where you hire people from outside to help manage the internal improvements of an organization within the clinical setting. But I'm wondering if you are experiencing the same pain points that other clinicians have in terms of having a true seat at the table and being able to kind of, manipulate and be a strong influencer for improvements in provider change of culture and so forth. So can you tell me a little bit about why it was important to bring someone from the outside who has no understanding about the culture within the clinical and hospital setting to influence leadership?
Yeah, I think for our organization, they brought me in, I think because I didn't have any preconceived notions. I worked at one other hospital for a few months, so I didn't really understand healthcare yet. I think the importance of the outside eyes, if you will, was that I didn't know what was going on. And I think that's really important. I've built a team and brought a lot of people that were not from healthcare for the same reason, that they come with this fresh set of eyes. They don't really, they don't buy into the hierarchy. We don't really understand it. I mean, I hear about it, but I'm not worried about talking to a doctor or a nurse, you know, or a CNA, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. They're all part of the team. And I think for me, the influence that I have, I've had challenges, but very rarely, because I really approach everything with data and as from a process standpoint. So if we're looking at the process and I can draw a process map, it doesn't matter who you are, that's your process, right? So I try to approach it very methodically and looking at the process and not really, it's not a physician problem, it's our problem. So again, a lot of my job is really bringing people together, and I work hard at that because of those challenges. Because I speak now after 5 years a little bit of clinical. I can understand, right? I can understand enough, I guess.
Can order off the menu.
Right. So I think that was the benefit.
I would extend that to the IT side as well, where if you do not have a seat at the table as far as the executives and the board, it really is a challenge, and it is absolutely necessary that all of us as IT leaders are at that table. It's critically important, and I can't understate that enough or overstate it enough. It's really, really critical to have us at the table with those executives. Otherwise, no one is listening.
Quick comment. We've worked very nicely with CMS, the State Quality Improvement Organization, and the one lesson we learned was when you have engineers at the table, it changes the dynamic. They look at processes, the way things are done. They draw you the most amazing maps of what you're currently doing and why it's all wrong, and then give you a route that just makes all the sense in the world. So to your point, I think the credibility of having non-clinicians on these teams is much better than it ever has been.
And one of the things is just asking why. If you're a non-clinician or non-native, so to speak, you ask, why are you doing this again? And a lot of times you don't ask the why because that's how you've been doing it for the past 5, 10, 15 years. So these fresh eyes, come in, ask these questions that forces you to reevaluate how you do what you do. Any last? You're good? All right. Well, please join me, everyone, in giving a warm round of applause for our panelists.